Good morning. Today we turn to Exodus chapter 3, but I want to do things a little bit differently. Instead of going word by word, phrase by phrase, I want to look at a theme that has been developing since the very beginning of the book of Genesis, specifically how God identifies himself. Now here for the first time in Exodus chapter 3, God introduces himself to Moses, who, as we know, was born to a Hebrew woman, was adopted by the daughter of Pharaoh, who was himself the king of Egypt, and has now, at this point, been exiled from Egypt into the land of Midian, completely disgraced. He has no future except for a simple one. He thinks he is to be a shepherd, a husband, hopefully a father, but beyond that, he has no dreams or ambitions. Any dreams or ambitions he might have had were destroyed when he killed an Egyptian in defense of a Hebrew laborer. But God has other plans, and God comes to him in the form of a burning bush that nonetheless fails to burn despite being on fire. Now, in the English language, we simply call our one true God, the one true God, God. But here in Genesis and into Exodus, God has been identified another way. We must remember that while God is the God of the Israelites, he is not the only God in the region or in the world who is acknowledged. When he first introduces himself to Abraham, we simply know him as the God of Abraham. This develops through generations as being the God of Jacob, the God of Isaac, and the God of Abraham. But still, the way that God identifies himself is only through this lineage, this exact lineage. Now here in Exodus chapter 3, when God appears in the burning bush, he says just these words. He calls out to Moses and says, "Moses, Moses." Moses replying, "Here I am." And he says, "I am the God of your father." His Hebrew father, his father who was a Levi man. "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." These are powerful words. These are words of heritage. These are words of lineage. These are words of a shared history. These are words of comfort to people living in exile, people living in slavery. And this has been enough up until this point. But when we turn to verse 13, Moses points out to God, "If I come to the Israelites," and granted, Moses doesn't really want to come to the Israelites. He wants to stay with his sheep and his goats as a shepherd in the wilderness. I repeat, if I, Moses, come to the Israelites and say to them, "The God of your ancestors has sent me to you," they will ask, "What is his name?" Remember, these are a people in exile, a people enslaved. They know intellectually that they are descended from Jacob, that they are the 12 tribes descended from the 12 sons of Jacob. But they need more than that. They need a name. They need something to physically hold on to. They need a hope. They need proof. Verse 14 of Exodus chapter 3. And God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said further, thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. I just want you to think about that for a moment. Now, of course, I am who I am is a translation into English. The word or name in Hebrew is often considered so sacred that we, as humble human beings, are not worthy enough to speak it. Which is why, in English, it is often translated simply as I am, to show that respect to God. But think, the name of God translates as I am who I am. He's saying, I am me. I am myself. I am the one. I am the only. I am your God. It's a powerful statement. It resonates. It's very haunting, in my opinion. It is a statement of greatness, a statement of power, a statement from God saying, you don't need a name. You don't need a name such as the Nile, which is a river and a god. You don't need a name like that. You don't need a physical river. You don't need a name such as Baal, who was worshipped in northern Israel around this time. You do not need a name such as Asherah, who was the consort of Baal and also worshipped in and around Israel at this time. You do not need a name like Osiris or Anubis, those being distinctly Egyptian gods. No, what God is saying is you don't need a name for me at all. If you need something other than the fact that I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, if you need something more than identifying me as the God of your ancestors and of your heritage, then all you need to know is that I am me. I am what I say I am. He is not costumes. He is not pageantry. He is not an idol that is shiny and yet easily breakable. He is something else entirely. And with these words, Moses goes to the Israelites. And with these words, Moses goes to Pharaoh, who would have been some sort of a cousin or even brother to him, due to his adoption by Pharaoh's daughter, just after the time of his birth. And with these words, he takes the Israelites, and he leads them into the desert. And although they wandered for 40 long years, and although Moses himself never reached the promised land, I am the God who is exactly what he said he was, delivered an enslaved people back home. And why a burning bush? Well, for the first question, God chose Moses for a very particular task, just as he chooses each and every one of his followers and believers for very specific tasks, great or small, recognized in books as great as the Bible, and only remembered by close friends and families in most instances. Why the burning bush? It's certainly fantastical. It makes a great story. If I'm entirely honest, it can make a very terrifying nightmare in the right circumstances. But the thing about the burning bush is that it was exactly what Moses needed to start him on his path, not necessarily to greatness, but to God's work. He was a shepherd in the wilderness of Midian, a burning bush that yet does not burn, that does not dwindle, is something that would have caught his attention. It would make him look twice. And a voice coming from that bush simply is a way for God to communicate specifically to Moses in that moment. If we look through the Bible, we see all sorts of moments, great and small, in which God chose very particular ways to communicate to his prophets, the kings of Israel, and his believers. God rarely does the same thing twice, if ever. And that's because no two people throughout history are the same. What would catch Moses' attention wouldn't necessarily catch yours today, in 2020 America. If the burning bush seems grand and over the top, well then, perhaps that's because this is one of the first instances where God had to catch somebody's attention quickly, like that. There was a problem that needed fixing on a national level, almost immediately. Perhaps it is so grand and over the top because Moses needed grand and over the top to convince him. We are fortunate in many ways to live several thousand years after this story. We possess the Bible. We have the knowledge that God does communicate. Although angels singing in the heavens might be nice, God knows it is no longer required. God knows that when he needs to speak to you, that there are other, smaller, subtler ways. And he trusts that you will listen. He trusts that you will see the signs. He trusts that you will not need a burning bush or a forest full of flame to understand that he is present here with you in this moment. Now, of course, this can be frustrating. With the subtler signs, they're so easy to misinterpret or perhaps miss altogether. Who doesn't want a tornado singing to you though not causing any destruction. Who doesn't want the burning bush? Who doesn't want those angels in the heavens, or that new star leading you on your path to redemption? It's only human, after all. But we must trust in God. We must trust that He is communicating with us. We just have to look for it. We just have to squint our spiritual eyes a little more, and then perhaps we'll say, ah, there He was all along. God has never once abandoned His people. And we, as followers of Christ, as friends of Christ, are most certainly His children. So know that while you are sitting in your living room, your kitchen, watching this on YouTube, that God may not set your rose garden on fire to get your attention, but He will be doing something else, something small, something perhaps insignificant. And it will be so obvious, you may just almost miss it. God bless you this morning and every day that is to come. Amen.